This is the last thing that I want to read that I wrote that I feel has more of a positive note, and that rhymes. And tomorrow I might read that article from veronica.org about are we drugging our prophets and healers? And I want to read that because it really summarizes my feelings about things very nicely. And I'm really not good at summarizing things. I'm good at talking a lot, but when it comes to actually making a summary of something, no. So I feel her article, if I was able to summarize things, I might say it in a similar way. So I really appreciated reading it, and I'll probably email her and maybe share some of my thoughts about that I'll share in this video and see what happens from that. I just feel like she speaks my language. But I want to read what I wrote for Katie Motram's Emerging Proud campaign, and the article's already published, but I just want to read it because it kind of goes in sequence with the things I've been reading lately. And hopefully then after today and tomorrow I won't read anything anymore, really. So I wrote this in March, and that was before I knew I was going to be initiated into a coming off medications process by the universe. And when that happened, I really had to be aware and understand the universe was telling me, okay, now it's time to come off meds. It's not time to take more meds. It's not time to change meds. It's not time to be afraid of yourself. It's not time to bow down to the authority of what other people would tell you to do. It's time to listen to yourself and get off this toxic crap. And that's sort of an example of what I was talking about last video, when the rhythm of the universe and the brain come in and change, and if we just sit there in fear, we're not actually participating with what that rhythm is trying to create. It's not necessarily trying to create us sitting there in fear for the rest of our life, but it's trying to create something. And I took it as a sign to begin tapering off my meds with the support of Hearty Nutritionals. And so far, so good. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks off the meds. The 3-week mark will be something, because that will mark the longest I've been off meds in the last 6 years. So the journey's not over, it's just different. So here I go, reading my story. Emerging through the mental illness paradigm. In my experience, and in perhaps that of many others, what is called spiritual emergence or spiritual emergency is not a linear or well-supported journey. My journey of spiritual emergency started 6 years ago, and I was soon captured by the dominant pathologizing mental illness paradigm. After spending 2 months in altered states and parallel realities, I was funneled to the psych ward, where after 2 days, I was told a hypnotizing story about how I had a mental illness called bipolar disorder. Little did they know that I was immune to this indoctrination of word viruses. As I said to myself silently, that's not it. I did not flinch or voice my disagreement with this narrow interpretation, as I realized that it would be like talking to a wall and that I was trapped against a wall. Their explanation came nowhere close to explaining the immensity of the flux and flow roller coaster ride in consciousness that the power of the universe had thrust me into. I was put on daily antipsychotics and stayed in the hospital 6 weeks. Shortly after leaving the hospital, I had a terrible akathisia reaction to the medication and went back to the hospital for another 6 weeks. They took me off antipsychotics, and I was on lithium, Zoloft, and trazodone. I suffered profound grief seeing the situation I found myself in. How did this happen? Is there a way out? I felt the only way out was through, and I decided to play the role of mentally ill, though this was never my interpretation of myself, while doing the best I could within the limitations that were imposed upon me. I was lucky to move to supported housing and form many great relationships. These relationships are the most healing aspect and with profound gratitude I say I wouldn't be where I am today without them. For 3.5 years, I had lots of fun getting involved in everything in the recovery process. It was sort of like a second childhood, and I laughed myself all the way out of medically imposed rock bottom. The next 2 years are a different story, though I wouldn't change a thing, as I have learned so much about myself and the system. After 3.5 years, I was slowly tapered off my medications with the help of my psychiatrist. I was off all of them for a couple of weeks when that universal process in consciousness started up again. I ended up in the psych ward after an intense immersion in expanded consciousness land. Past lives mix with the present, and knowing too much becomes too much. In a way, I feel like medication helps me stay in consensus reality because my brain can be too sensitive for the desensitized and overstimulating world. I was lucky to have a psychiatrist who only gave me antipsychotics for 10 days, just to reconnect me with reality, and then sent me on my way. The same cycle happened again 6 months later. I work as a peer support worker, and I find it difficult to witness how the system suppresses and pathologizes people. Many things are so subtle yet extremely important. That, mixed with past trauma, can lead me to an accumulation of stress. Fortunately, I had the same doctor who gave me antipsychotics just for the 10 days I was on the ward. This was important because I learned that I can have a major crisis and be back to work in 2 weeks. This doctor didn't see me as more mentally ill and drugged me up accordingly. She medicated me for temporary distress and then stopped the extra medication. These 2 hospitalizations made me feel comfortable going to the hospital when I was in distress, as there isn't anything else out there. It also set me up for my next hospitalization. Fast forward another 8 months. I again found myself in distress, even though taking daily medications. It seems there is a process that wants to complete itself. I went to the same psych ward but had a different doctor. She put me on daily high-dose antipsychotics with the intention of long-term use. My refusal of this treatment fell on deaf ears and I was trapped. I immediately took a turn for the worst. From that lucid part of my consciousness, I watched as the 5 years of recovery went down the drain, as I felt myself becoming insane. My plea to be switched to the doctor I already had a rapport with, who knew my history, who I knew would not drug me up like this, was met with condescending laughter. I felt such profound helplessness and desperation, as I could see that this trajectory would lead me to be discharged to a long-term care facility where I would have no control over my medications and would be caught in an endless loop of medication adjustments and assessment. How many people does this happen to? I felt like I didn't just see this for my own self's sake, but for others who get trapped in this. I knew that it was the medication doing this to me, since I had the context of past hospitalizations being a quick blip. Then I remembered my first hospitalization and how the medications made me worse. And from that initial treatment, it seemed like my worsening of symptoms justified any further means and treatments. I saw that I had been turned into a chronic mental patient from day one by how I was received, perceived, and treated. Psychiatry took authority over my experiences and warped my life on this path of pathology. And now it was like I was back at the very beginning, and that it was the medication that did it, not my own brain. I later found out that the term to describe when doctors make patients worse is iatrogenic illness. With some strong self-advocacy, I was able to switch to the doctor I had prior, and she listened to me and could see that I was worse. She started to taper me off the high-dose antipsychotic, and I felt profound relief. I really didn't see how I was ever going to be discharged as myself without getting off that medication. Instead of spending 10 days in the psych ward like the previous 2 days, I was in there 33 days and experienced tremendous suffering. I was so thankful to get out of there, and a month later, I was completely off of the antipsychotics. Instead of going back to work right away, I didn't return to peer support to the same capacity in order to keep the stress low because of the fear of needing hospitalization. It makes me so angry to now know experientially that so much of what is done to people in the name of treatment induces iatrogenic illness, which is passed off as worsening of one's mental illness. It's scary to think that those of us who do not know the distinction between which energies are our crisis and which energies are from the side effects of medications will buy into the lines we are fed that our brain has become more defective or that our illness is getting worse over time. These are myths. They don't account for how people generally get more medicated over time, and that makes things worse. I've had 5 crises and my brain is sharper than ever. In my experience, if it's treated as a short blip, it will be a short blip, and I can integrate it, become stronger, and move on. There's so much to this, and I'm very grateful for all of my experiences, as I feel I was meant to learn these lessons about what's really going on, not just by reading it in a book, but by nearly being swallowed up by the chemical machine. That being said, I'm still being chewed, and I'm not entirely against psychiatry. I currently take lithium as a voltage buffer to insulate this extreme electricity that attempts to neuroplastically encapsulate more of what the universe is trying to show us. This hospitalization made me very angry at what's being done to people in their vulnerable states. We need more love and less labels. We need to be received as we would a newborn baby, though even that is medicalized in questionable ways. I am now terrified of the psych ward. I no longer see it as a safe place to go to get reconnected to reality. This introduced another fear. If I had no safe place to go, what would happen if I didn't call for help? Now I was terrified of the psych ward and myself. An aside, a reframe. Sometimes I get to a state of consciousness where I see too much, and when I see too much, I feel too much, and when I feel too much, the only way to get back to me is to re-experience old trauma, to get back to the ego-me way of seeing. There are many ways to reframe it, but it's perhaps a safety mechanism to ensure I don't get lost in prophecy, and I can again resume some semblance of functionality in the consensus order. It's freaking scary to go from zoomed out to infinite possibilities, to zoom back into my finite body. Perhaps getting scared shitless is a way the universe scares consciousness back to the body. Again, my brain reframes experiences most often shrouded in the shame of labels, spouted from the lips of those who've undoubtedly not yet had their brains sprained by the games of the consensus cage. Fast forward another 6 months. I was trying to keep my stress low through deliberate lifestyle design factors. I recently gathered the distance from my terrifying hospitalization to launch a complaint regarding the way I was treated in the hospital. Talking about it puts me in a place of anger with the system. Why work in peer support helping people that have been given iatrogenic illnesses and then given the consolation that you can recover? What a slap in the face to be told we can recover from the induced chemical trap that causes more problems and justifies the trap. This is not the root of it, not even close. 2.5 months later, and I'm celebrating my longest stint without a crisis, but that's as far as it goes. I've been feeling off for several days, though it usually comes on quickly. I was getting ready for the day when it started. I could hear my voice in my head, but it wasn't normal chatter. I could hear what I was saying to myself while seemingly unconscious during a traumatic event a short time before all this started 6 years ago. My consciousness was somewhere else, and my body responded with a state of terror. It was overwhelming. I could feel the fear of that time, sensing that I was not going to survive, that there was no way out. In this way, this is still true of my life now. Is there a way out of this mental illness paradigm? A paradigm that studies show consumes the lives of its participants 14 to 32 years early, either directly or indirectly. I knew I didn't want to call for the ambulance. Something in my head told me to get to the mental health clubhouse I'm a member of. I also was aware of another one of my safety plans, which is rather odd. Beside my bed is a zap strap and 4 PRNs. This needs to be accompanied by a cell phone and a charger so that I can be released by the person I call. With the zap strap, I knew I could secure myself in one place and wait it out. I've never had to do this, but knowing I had this option if it got too intense, bought me the time to try to get out the door or keep myself safe in one place instead of going to the psych ward. I have many plans not to end my life, as I have had experiences of dissociation or feeling like I'm a homeless person. In this incongruence of consciousness with reality, it's important to keep my body safe and not to confuse what's going on in consciousness with what needs to be acted through the body. When I was hospitalized the very first time, I saved myself from jumping off a balcony in a terrified state of confusion. I remembered in the nick of time that I had handcuffs in the drawer across the room that I purchased as a child from a garage sale. I used the last of my strength to fasten myself to the bottom railing of the balcony. From there, my consciousness left my body, and I was a bird flying south. I later felt an angelic being trying to lift me out of my body, but I was handcuffed. I had the sense I wanted to go with them. The only time I opened my eyes, I saw blood all over the place. I also felt like a homeless man lying on the street and hearing everyone busily walking by. We are all one consciousness, that's for certain. So that's where I got the idea for the Zap Strap. It's more portable, and I know this works for me. For some, it might make things worse. It's important to know oneself when it comes to dancing with altered states and the system that wants to make it into a defect. I managed to finish getting dressed, get in my car, and make the 20-minute drive. I arrived in distress and was received with love, compassion, and acceptance of a wonderful community that I am so fortunate to be a part of. The people and the place and the space are so much a part of me that there's no separation. During the hospital stay that was so destructive on the worst day, I felt I could not go on, and I called out for help inside. A person that works at the community popped by for a visit. I had not planned on getting out of bed or eating any meals that day. I was done. She stayed for 10 minutes, and I shared how I was struggling. She listened and brought me kombucha. She must have brought the whole community with her energetically, because after she left, I noticed something had lifted. I felt I could go on. I felt like being up and about and eating lunch. Relationships are more powerful than medication, and I feel her visit negated some of the toxic effects of medication. I took a PRN antipsychotic and spent time talking to different people. I rested in a room for a few hours. It was just like how a respite should be, though the place isn't a respite. I found respite in the space of their hearts. They listened. They care about me, and I care about them. We are all equals there. They were very aware of how I did not want to go to the hospital, though they gently mentioned it once as an option. They did not call the ambulance. At the end of the day, one of them drove me to be with my family. That night was the worst internal suffering I've ever experienced. Each time I woke up in the night, I took another antipsychotic. I stayed in bed most of the day. I didn't talk about anything I was experiencing inside with my family. By staying with it, surrendering to it, and not being taken by it, it passed. If I would have talked about the inner bizarre stuff that was bubbling through me, my family might have wanted to take me to the psych ward. Each time this happens, I learned. I learned that the process of being admitted to the psych ward, where they make you describe all the strange things to 3 different people to the point of anger, that they aren't listening to the fact that one needs help, and then they admit you in a riled up state, all the while writing all these things down to forever justify any form of treatment or mistreatment, is detrimental. It's perhaps beneficial to ask, why talk about this extreme stuff when it will just pass like the common cold if I just lay down and wait it out? I wonder about this, though I don't feel it's a final answer. The point is, it's important to be aware who one is talking to. What lens do they carry? Are they listening to label and medicate further? So in the case of going through distress in the community with a supportive family, friends, and a few PRNs, maybe it's good to stay quiet as not to scare them. This is the strategy I used this time, and it worked. I took a number of PRNs the first night, 4 the next day, and just 1 a night for 10 days, and then half each night for 14 days. I really appreciate that my family was able to love and accept me this time around. My mom brought me juice with moringa powder and checked in on me. I felt a sense that everyone was doing exactly what I needed without me having to ask. They didn't fear me and steer me to the psych ward. I still had to contain the experience in order to be able to go through it with their help. It had been a learning process for them too. I felt a sense of awe that I was able to co-create this situation for myself out of the background of such a horrific prior hospital stay. I was shown how it could be for people in distress. This time, for the good. I saw that love really is the answer. The love of community and family to allow someone to go through it without transferring the responsibility to a medical authority. Taking an antipsychotic isn't ideal, but I was able to take it just as I would be given it by a good doctor in the psych ward, but administered by myself with support. This is huge for me as I now feel free in many respects. I feel like I can travel, and if I have distress, I can manage without a hospital. I feel like I can move to a small town that is peaceful and not have to live so close to a major hospital. I feel happy in knowing that perhaps the psych ward and all that precipitates from it has hopefully lost a customer. I no longer fear myself or the intense terror of distress. I no longer fear being re-traumatized by the hospital. What a difference a year can make. I turned 34 in the psych ward, and I will turn 35, bathing in the hot sunny weather of another country.